Last night, a friend rushed me out of the house at number 5 to go see the opening night of a local bar. After a few drinks, I realized my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table in the bar's bathroom. Out of luck, I called my friend's phone and called my phone. After 2 rings, someone hung up with a soft smile and didn't answer again. Finally, I gave up and went home. I found my phone. It was lying right where I had left it on my nightstand. When I was a kid, I was always the last kid to be picked up by the bus driver to go to school. One day, I was waiting for the bus alone and the bus stopped without any other kids. The bus driver laughed and told me to jump on it. I felt bad. I asked where the other kids were. He said we'll get them right away, just get up, but didn't do anything crazy. I just kept saying no and he shrugged and let the real bus go. I got to school a few minutes later and my parents didn't know until I mentioned it that night. Looking back, they were pretty worried. I remember them rushing to call number 3 a few times. A few years ago I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and completely renovated it. He had put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it. After I got home I realized that there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45 but looked much older. She would stay up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone was so hard that I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her and told her to shut up. He opened the door and I quickly peeked at his walls. There were crosses painted in different colors and words like Jesus and angels written all over. The windows were painted black. No light was allowed in. There were damp yellow stains, 50-year-old carpets, dogs and cockroaches, everywhere. No dogs. Even though I asked him to please keep it down, he just stared at me and turned it off. Then the next night he played the radio even louder. I asked my girlfriend to stay at the door. I woke up in the middle of the night to see a shadow of someone by the bed watching us sleep. I think I do the same thing in the dark as I usually do. But then the shadow started talking. It was my neighbor and he was holding something in his hand. He broke in at night and who knows how long he was standing there. The door should be locked at night, he says, and leaves the next morning. I hear someone. There's a strange noise under my bedroom window. My neighbor is talking to himself in his tongue. He's got a plastic bag in his hand, his rotting dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside and I can smell death coming from that bag right now. I'm scared. He's clearly very crazy. I go up and knock on another guy's door and ask what's going on. The guy is just as scared as me. Apparently he broke in. One evening in his apartment he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to have breakfast, but he's staring at her from behind the couch with a power drill in his hand. Now I'm starting to think I know what he had in his hand at this point. I'm basically myself. I call the police and they know everything about him. Apparently he's a violent schizophrenic and he hasn't taken his medication. But they can't force him into the apartment because he owns it. They can only arrest him when he gets out. I wait for him to run out for the next 2 days. At 2 a.m. when I heard him crossing the street to the 7-Eleven, I lit a cigarette. I called the police. They brought 3 cars in a special van in less than 2 minutes. They locked him up, put him in the van, and drove him to some establishment. In less than a minute, it was like he was never there. I never saw him again. He's still staring at me in my sleep. I'm number 2. About 15 minutes after finishing my night shift at work, there was a huge crash through an office window. So I got up. And I saw someone throw a fairly large rock through the front window of the building. This was especially strange because I work in an industrial area at 11:30 p.m. and no other businesses were open. I went back to my desk. I quickly called the security guards to let them know and decided to go home. I was walking out of the building. I was getting more and more scared about it and ended up running to my car. I'm almost home and I calmed down a bit when I realized I hadn't unlocked my car when I got in. The whole time I was quickly checking the back seat with my hand to see if there was a potential killer there, but there was nothing there. About 30 minutes ago I called a friend of mine who said he was out drinking, so I decided I would join him. I'm doodling along the road holding my bike. The night is beautiful and I'm not in much of a hurry, just enjoying the moonlight. I'm straight up and stuck to the side of the road when I hear someone driving behind me. He passes me very slowly and when he's next to me he gives me a smile and I can only describe it as complete madness. I get a little scared and when he drives I realize he's riding my mom's bike, needless to say. When I got there, sure enough, his bike was missing and one of my car doors was unlocked on the back left, the door I was driving through, and there was no need to open that door number. I worked at the campground. Night shift 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. It wasn't bad every night. I played on my PS2 most of the night. Only had to work with 1 or 2 people on busy nights. I was in this little 8x8T shack, nothing but darkness all night. My first week, another guy on the 3rd shift who was quitting his job told me about this pay phone a few feet from his shack where I worked. He said it rang every night at 4:17 a.m. One time it was probably an automated test call. He guessed he never answered. I myself went to work for a few months. It was the middle of summer, so I kept my windows closed most nights so I wouldn't hear the pay phone going off in the middle of August. I started by leaving the window open at 4:17 at night. Every morning the phone would ring. Even though it sounded terrible like the pay phone was drowning in water, the phone would ring and then I would leave it where it was. One night I was shocked. I set an alarm for 4:15 to answer the phone and went to wait for the phone until it rang. I would answer the phone but the phone was off. There was no sound, as if someone was on the other line but the phone was not answering. I hung up the phone a few times to say hello. I did this every night for a week, with the same results. I didn't think anything of it and then left the phone alone for about a month. The first week of October I decided to answer the phone again. I set my alarm and when the time came I repeatedly said hello to the phone. Then I heard someone gasp for breath. The voice was rough and sounded like it was gurgling with gravel. It said my name, my whole name, first, middle, and last. It was a voice. I had never heard a voice cut in my throat before and I hung up. I changed the dial pad and pressed *69. The number came from California. I lived in Indiana.